Okay, hi everybody, welcome. I'm finally back to do a little video for this channel, and so over the past couple hours it's cooling down and I'm fanning it in here, but I've been going over some of my notes and kind of going back to where I left off with some of my ideas about dark matter. So I thought I'll just shoot the shit and go over some of my notes tonight for you guys for food for thought. It might not be perfectly coherent, but I'm going to try to weave some of this together because sort of like through some of my synchronicities over the past few months, I've started to just kind of explore certain avenues and make certain little connections just, you know, for my educational process. And a lot of it has to do with numbers and synchronicity. And the word synchronicity invokes the idea of numbers to me. And I think that numbers are really the shells and, you know, the construct of this reality that's basically an expression of the spiritual. So, basically, I found this, my notebook, and I had that, the little drawings I made with my ideas about dark matter. And this whole idea of dark matter and the fact they have to call it dark matter, even though it's not really matter, is fascinating to me. And so you have this contraction and expansion happening in our universe in the most basic way, right? And so I've been sort of, in my mind, constructing how all of that leads to this, you know, 6-directional 3D cube, this construct that we live in, and how that is unlocked through the esoteric symbolism of the numbers, right? And so, you know, I think part of it too is I'm seeing how a lot of it is this mirroring process, and the symmetry has been, the symmetry aspect came up, right? And obviously you can think of butterflies and whatnot. But then I uploaded this video a few months ago about beetles, and I started to have synchronicity with beetles, like ladybugs. And like a ladybug's, you know, they have wings, like, and the winged beetles also have this certain symmetry. And that reminds me of this structure that's shown in this graphic here. But you can also see the numerical symmetry here as well. It's just kind of interesting. So what other little notes do I have here? So, and synchronicity, this is my favorite quote about synchronicity. So, but really the connection between the internal and the external world being revealed through synchronicity is, I think, a huge part of what the work is and what our work in this reality is all about. And what's interesting too, I noticed later on, because I was going through my little beetle fetish, was that actually that Jung, you know, had his own beetle synchronicity, which you can read about with one of his patients. And she was describing a dream about a golden beetle, and then a beetle flew by out the window and he grabbed it and showed it to her, or something like that. So, but it's interesting because the beetle comes up in his synchronicity work. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay. So I started to dig in a little bit, because I don't know how many of you know, but I've had this beetle tattoo. I got a scarab beetle tattoo a long time ago, when I was like 20, I don't know, 24 maybe. And the reason I got a scarab beetle wasn't it's not because I was a student of really Egyptology. I'm still not really an expert in Egyptian mythology or any of it. It was because I was so attracted to beetles and scarabs. And then seeing the Egyptian depictions of them, it had amazing symbolism to me. And I've always had beetles land on my body, and I've had beetles, you know, got a little collection of dead beetles that I've found. So I've always had a bug fetish anyway. And I was going through my tattoo phase, but I got this scarab pushing up the sun because I was fascinated by the symbolism of it. And as far as, you know, a lot of the Egyptian gods and the Egyptian symbolism and pantheon, it's like, I think because it's so old, it has an effect on most people's subconscious, you know. There's symbolism that cross-culturally doesn't so much affect people. But when it comes to these really older cultures like the Egyptians, you know, we see so much of it in Washington, D.C. and like in modern times. It's still having a profound effect on people's subconscious. And so I always approach this stuff to really, because once you start to have more of a conscious connection to this stuff, people can't manipulate you with symbolism the same way. But anyway, don't get tattoos. They're toxic. I would totally talk myself out of it. I'm not trying to say tattoos are good or anything, but I'm just showing you guys. I've been into scarab beetles for a long time. And then, you know, of course, again, I'm thinking about dark matter and this contraction of dark matter, and I start looking at the Egyptian scarab. Now, this is a really famous, very artistic, amazing piece. I can't remember how old it is, but, you know, it's one of the museum artifacts, and it's made with lapis. Okay, here we go. The colors kind of pop on this one, more so. But either way, you see how... I can't find the other one that I had, but I was just basically... My whole point here is I wanted to show you how the scarab pushing up the sun, I think, is an interesting symbol. That it occurred to me that the scarab represents this force of dark matter. And that is what is involved in this forming of the shells and the shaping of our reality, right? And the material world, and how things manifest in the coordinates of space and time. So I had this whole revelation about that, and how the beetle, it's like it's compressing the sun. And of course, you know, the whole symbolism is that the sun, the dung beetle is pushing up the sun. It's pushing the sun across the sky, just like the beetle pushes its balls of dung, right? So it's kind of like the dung represents that, it represents the excrement, right? So in a way, it's saying that the sun itself is a representation of a deeper reality. And that's something that is very, very, very important to remember. But then, of course, the sunlight, when you compare that to the light that's coming off the plasma computer screen, you're talking about something that's a mimicry then of that sunlight, which is you could say a simulation of the spiritual. Anyway, so I've been thinking about how, you know, the dung beetle is burying its eggs inside of that dung. So it represents that life force and the life cycles. And this is where this whole, you know, reincarnational cycle and the life cycles, round and round we go. And so you get into this whole idea of the dark matter, and this is what the beetle reminds me of. You know, there's a creation of force here. The scarab is, the wings of the scarab have that electrical aspect to them, that electrical dynamic. And so it really does remind me of all this electric universe theory and stuff like that. And so I'm kind of starting to get more into that, to have a better comprehensive understanding. And I find this interesting, and I will post this below because it relates to what I'm talking about. And it relates to this idea of the electric universe theory, and how, you know, it really, I think, is not perfect, but this is a much better model than the dark matter model. It actually makes a lot more sense. And, you know, this counter rotation and observing counter-rotating shells of matter. So I find this to be definitely related to what I'm saying and the symbology, the esoterics of it. Hopefully I'm not too far out there with you guys, but you know, then of course I was thinking also about the piezoelectric factor as well. I don't know how this came up. It came up with this electric universe stuff, and so I started to think about it. Now, it's funny because it says piezoelectricity is the electrical charge that accumulates in certain solid materials in response to applied mechanical stress. So the word piezoelectricity means electricity resulting from pressure and latent heat, and derived from the Greek piezein, which means squeeze or press, and electron, which means amber, ancient source of electrical charge. I don't know, it's funny to me because I think I just sort of like randomly typed in piezoelectric beetle just because that's where my brain was going with this, and this is what I ended up with. You know, these cyborg beetles, they're using these beetles basically, they're trying to harness the piezoelectric energy that's created by these cyborg beetles that they have under their neuro control. So, but this adulteration and disregard for nature in the meantime is not, it doesn't bode well. I can tell you right now, the Beatles do not want 5G. I had a conversation with the Beatles. They told me we don't want 5G. So, yeah, anyway, I just thought that it was funny that I had that synchronicity of that showing up. So yeah, basically they're trying to figure out how they're going to have these little drones capable of carrying a payload, but able to be powered by a power source that's on board. Because, you know, a battery's not going to cut it. Especially for all the power it would require to carry things. But they're using a green, so a piezoelectric beam attached to a green June beetle reveals optimum location to scavenge energy. Wow. Anyway. Oh, and before I end on that note, is that it totally reminds me of Princess Nausicaä in the Valley of the Wind. If you haven't seen this movie, a lot of you would love it. I loved it because, I mean, it's just got so much symbolism that relates to my life and the things that I'm into. But it's totally related to what I'm talking about. And so the last thing I wanted to show you all is how, if you really look at numbers and map out like the numbers that have curves, and you can see, we've all heard about, you know, the 3, 6, 9, but you can also see how the 2, 5, 8 relates to each other. But the 1, the 4, and the 7 are the numbers that have no curvature. Okay, they're the keys to that dark matter.